Scripture reading this morning is Matthew chapter 2, verses 2 through 9. And we're starting the wonder of the season, the wonder of Advent, the wonder of Christmas. Wonder is the name of this sermon series, and it's going to take us through Epiphany. And this morning it's the wonder of a star. So the Scripture readings this morning, and if you want to, you can look up at these hanging stars, which I think are really cool, beautiful, as we're talking about this, but the wonder of a star. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who was born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophets has written. But you, Bethlehem in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler that will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star that they had seen when it arose went ahead of them until it stopped over a place where the child was. Now this may seem a little out of order because usually in a sermon series, the wise men are the last ones, but we're starting with them because we're going to start about the star. There's a passage from a sermon by Frederick Buechner is a good way to start talking about the wonder of Christmas. I'm just going to read you this passage because it's his words, not mine, but I'm going to read it to you because I want you to be able to understand exactly what he said. "Those who believe in God can never in a way be sure of him again." It's a weird way to start. Those who believe in God can never in a way be sure of him again. Once they have seen him in a stable, they can never be sure of where he will appear, or to what length he will go, or to what ludicrous depths of self-humiliation he will descend in his wild pursuit of man. If holiness and the awful power and majesty of God were present in this least auspicious of all events, this birth of a peasant's child, then there is no place or time so lowly and earthbound but that holiness can be present there too. And that's a fancy and nice way of saying if you can never be sure, once you believe in Christmas, you can never get away from it. Because if you can believe that God, the all-powerful, sent a baby to be born in a manger, there is no place or time so lowly and so earthbound that the holiness can be present there too. Once you believe in Christmas, it becomes a place of wonder. Waiting for all the goodness and beauty of life. Waiting that can stop us in our tracks sometimes. Waiting to speak to our hearts. Waiting to amaze us. Waiting to show us something that will lead us to God. But before God can show us anything, we have to have eyes that can see. Remember the old saying, blind in one eye can't see out of the other? We have to have eyes that can see. We often think of the eyes of children at Christmas, and I thought about that at the Christmas parade yesterday afternoon because the theme of the parade was Christmas through the eyes of a child. And I think that's Christmas through the eyes of the child is one of the reasons we love, if you're like me, you love Christmas music, you love Christmas movies, you like Christmas parades and all that kind of stuff because it takes you back a little bit. Okay? Back to when there was a time when it was a little bit simpler and a little bit happier. That childlike wonder that we all secretly wished we possessed. And if you're honest with yourself, there's a time whenever you all secretly wished you were still a child at Christmas. You know what I mean by that. Those were the good days. The amazement of the presents under the Christmas tree. The cookies half eaten on the table with the glass of Coca-Cola half drank. Because our Santa liked Coke and didn't like Honda Coke cans. With all the demands and distractions of the season, we often wish we could recapture some of that wonder from when we were a child a little bit again. During the next 4 weeks, we're going to discuss the wonder of Christmas. We're going to do the different elements of the Christmas story. Today's a Christmas, the wonder of a star. Next week's the wonder of a name. The following week's the wonder of a promise. And that last week before Christmas will be the wonder of the manger. Okay? It may seem a little out of order, but bear with me, and I think it'll all make sense. I'm going to start with the eyes to see. We do not have any idea historically when that star blazed forth in the sky. Nobody really has a good timeline. There's speculation, there's research, but nobody has a good idea. Did it just blaze forth? Just all of a sudden there it was? Or was it gradual? Did it start as a small thing and the next night it was brighter, the next night it was brighter? Was it truly a star? Or was it an alignment of planets? Right? Nobody knows. But we do know, if you have faith, that there was a star. Okay? The Magi saw the star and recognized it through their studies that it was a promise that would reveal God to them. It was a sign that God would be revealed to them. They went to Herod, who was one of the most powerful Jews in all of the world at the time, thinking that the king surely would have advisors that could assist them. And we don't know much about the wise men. We don't know how far they traveled. We don't know how long it took them to get there. We'll get to that in a minute. But Herod really did not know a whole lot about this star. But he played it kind of coy. He didn't really tell them much. Herod was actually a very jealous and cruel man. He had it all, but his eyes were blinded by what he thought he could lose. He was petty, and he saw the sign as a sign that could lead to a king that could replace him, and he didn't want to be replaced. So out of envy and jelly and pettiness, he plotted and eventually sent out a ruling to kill all the babies in Bethlehem, all the male boys in Bethlehem under the age of 2. Okay? And I think it's interesting that we listen to the news now and we say, oh, things are so violent, so terrible, but that wasn't real good back then. I mean, the king just said, everybody under the age of 2, male, gone. And it happened. Right? The Magi knew the star was for something else, though. We are often like the Magi, searching for something different in our lives. Just something a little different. Something more meaningful than wealth and prestige. We want to satisfy that longing in our heart. And in order to satisfy those longings, we need to have eyes that see. I will say I saw something posted on social media the other day that was kind of an interesting thing, because I think it's something that happens as you get older. And not to say that we don't like our nice possessions, but they said the older you get, you realize that a $30 watch tells the exact same time as a $30,000 watch. That a $15,000 car drives you to the same place the $75,000 car does. Okay? But sometimes those are the longings in our heart that get in the way of us seeing things. Right? We also have to be like the wise men, though, and not only have the courage to see, but have the courage to follow. There's times when I see things, but I don't do anything about it. Have to be able to follow. We often think of the Magi as just showing up at the manger the day Jesus was born, because that's the way we portray it. That's the traditional story, and it's a great story. You know? That's a neat way to portray the story, and we'll do that. Okay, but we don't know exactly what the timeline was, and the shepherds and the wise men, they probably didn't all show up at the same time. They probably came in at a little bit different times. It may have been as long as 2 years that it took the wise men to get there. If you think about Herod's edict, there's some reason he issued the decree for 2 years back. Either that or he just didn't want to miss anybody. Okay? But there's some reason it was there. Sometimes we need to follow along and have the courage to follow along, and sometimes that following costs us. When we follow, we do not know what we have to give up. Because to follow something means you're going to give up something along the lines. Maybe we're a little bit too busy and involved in other things to even see or even have the eyes that see that we need to follow. But we need to have eyes that see, and we need to be willing to follow. And then there's a third thing that we need to do that the wise men did, and that is have the humility to worship. Think about it. The Magi, we don't know exactly who they were, but they were obviously important people. For one, they gained an audience with Herod, so they were important people of some kind, okay? They held power and position and so forth, and when they got to where Jesus was, they fell at their feet and opened their gifts and worshiped the baby. And those gifts were prophetic, even, meaning the frankincense, myrrh, and gold. Gold for a king, and the frankincense and the myrrh to embalm bodies. Okay? Jesus was not royalty. Jesus hadn't even performed a miracle yet. And honestly, most people were probably not really buying Mary and Joseph's story about her being pregnant with God's son. Because let's face it, if somebody told you, if somebody walked into, if you were working in a hospital and somebody came in and said, I'm pregnant, but God's son is the father, you'd be like, whoa, we got another one, you know. They're not, we're not going to buy that. But these wise men believed. And not only did they believe, they worshiped. They fell at his feet and worshiped God. For the Magi, the star was a sign of things to come. They knew the world was changing, and they wanted to go see what it was about. We often will remain blind like Herod, who was blind to the signs and unwilling to let go of his throne. We don't want to see the signs, even though they're there. Or we could be like the Magi, who had the eyes to see, the courage to follow, and the humility to worship. Are those signs pointing you into the wonder of the star of God during this Advent season? If they're not, I encourage you to open your eyes and have eyes that see. The prophets foretold it. The desert burst into bloom. Angelic messengers delivered news. A priest lost his speech. A young woman found her voice. In this season of Advent, the scriptures revive old stories and bring new understandings. In the face of critics and skeptics, our faith cries out, resilient like a baby from a manger. From that Bethlehem beginning, Jesus baptized in the Jordan, spent his life serving others that all might know the compassionate attention of the loving God. Today, Jesus serves us again as we gather at this table he prepares for us. Let us pray. Dear Jesus of Advent, we remain a sacred mystery to us. You have brought good news for all the people who will not be afraid, for you are here. We are hungry for your love, which surpasses all of our understanding. We are thirsty for your spirit that never runs dry. And this meal, nourish our souls, feed our minds, quench our deepest longings, and forgive our wrongdoings, that we may glorify you every day of our lives. Amen. Holy Creator, bread of life, everlasting salvation, the light shines in the night will over it. We ask that you bless this wine and this bread, consecrate it for your service. This communion table is open to all. The bread will be taken together as our common communion.